there is going to be a series of investigations. We at Diem and Mera, we don't need an investigation. We've already provided the report on the most authoritative investigation before the accident happened. Not with a bit of hindsight. On 22nd of September, last September, Kriton Arsenis, one of our members of parliament, stood up in Greece's parliament and looked at the minister responsible for public transport and told him in no uncertain terms, I'm quoting verbatim, the Athens to Thessaloniki railway is the unsafest railway in Europe. We are going to mourn victims if you continue doing nothing about upgrading it and upgrading its safety features. That was last September. On the previous July of 2022, again, Kriton Arsenis had highlighted the unsafety, the lack of safety features of the whole gamut of our rail system, what is left of it, because most of it is derelict and simply doesn't function. A month before that, or so, I think it was May 2022, another of our members of parliament, Kleon Grigoriadis, had done something very similar. He had risen in parliament, addressing the government to relate to government ministers an experience that he and I had the previous night. We had paid a visit to a railway maintenance depot in the heart of Athens, a depot that houses about 30 maintainers, engineers of the railway and metro system of Greece, who had invited us to go and see with our own eyes the decrepitude of the equipment that they had to work with. In that particular depot, we were told, there used to be, up until 2 years ago, 64 engineers and maintenance staff. Today, there are 30. They have to work 7 days a week, simply because if they don't, the trains won't operate. They showed us the tools of the trade that had to work with, from small pieces of equipment to large railway carriages that house maintenance equipment. The point that we're making was that it was all breaking down and it was not being replaced. And when the tools that they had to work with broke down, they were forced to improvise, to create their own substitute tool they could weld together. Of course, you can imagine that these tools had no certification. They were actually breaking the law by using them, but management didn't leave them any alternative. So, in other words, Mera 25 in Parliament on 4 different occasions, I mentioned 2 or 3, but there were 4 occasions, we warned the government of what was coming. We do not need an inquiry to tell us what happened. Now, of course, there is a larger story there. There is a story of Greece's bankruptcy 13 years ago, which plunged investment, especially public investment, into a black hole. A 13-year-long bankruptcy, which was perpetuated massively and exemplified and reinforced by the policies of the lenders of the infamous Troika. But it's not just that. There is neoliberal ideology as well. In the year 2010, just as Greece fell into the bankruptcy hole, the European Union demanded of the Greek government, as part of its Thatcherite model, of breaking up public utilities and then privatizing the fragments. That was the Margaret Thatcher model. This is how she broke down the electricity grid and power stations in the United Kingdom, and then later on, British Railways. a small aside, just to confirm the pertinence of the link-up that I'm making. In the 1990s, the private completed by the Tories, and then the Labour government of that Tory presenting himself as a Labourite. You remember a fellow called Tony Blair. It was completed in 1997. 2 years later, in Paddington, close to the Paddington railway station, there was a almighty tragic accident claiming 31 lives. The Royal Commission that was convened after that clearly pointed the finger at this combination of the breakdown, the fragmentation of the railway system, dividing the railway tracks from the rolling stock to create supposedly some kind of pseudo quasi-market. That's the neoliberal mantra. And demonstrated that it was this privatization, initially the breakup, and then the privatization of British Railways that led to 31 people dying and many, scores of people injured. This is exactly what happened in Greece. Only it was worse. Let me share with our audience and you, comrades, my personal experience when I was Minister of Finance. When I moved into the Ministry of Finance on end of January 2015, I inherited a 1,300-page list of commitments that the previous government had made to the Troika. It was essentially the longest death certificate of a nation. In it, we had the privatization of water, of electricity, of the railways, of our ports, of our airports, the takeover of all public assets by the lenders, the International Monetary Fund, the European Central Bank, and the European Commission on behalf of the world's oligarchy. It was an awful document, which of course I was never going to implement. That's why I was elected. That's why our government was elected, not to implement it. But the number one priority I had as a Minister of Finance of a bankrupt country was to haircut, to extinguish a significant part of our public debt to the international financiers and to the Troika. Because when you owe money that can never be repaid, you're a slave. And if that entity is not a person, it's not a company, but it is a state, then that is a vassal state. It is a state that is essentially in a debtor's prison owned by the international financial private and public community, oligarchs, crows, okay, vultures, I should say. I should never call them a community. They don't deserve that. So my number one priority was to get rid of the debt in order to create the degrees of freedom that were necessary for a sovereign government, a democratically elected government, to do everything else that they needed to do in order to look after public goods, human beings, education, hospitals, the economy, and so on. So my strategy was concentrate on the debt restructure, a deep debt cut. And when it came to all the other bits and pieces that were inside that litany of evil, that program of effectively destroying everything, to slow them down, to throw spanners in their works. So when they were coming to me, they were saying, oh, okay, here's a commitment, your previous government has signed it, to give 14 of your most lucrative airports, including Mykonos, Chania, Santorini, amazingly profitable airports, to give it to a German company called Fraport. Yeah, I would say, hang on a second, give me a specification of how much money they would invest in it, where the money would come from, trying to slow them down. Same with the ports, same with the railways. when they said, "Oh, we are the previous government has committed, and we have a plan." That's the Troika speaking, as if they own the country. We have a plan to give them to an Italian company, FS, Ferrovie dello Stato, which is, state railways. I would point out that FS is bankrupt. I said, look, we have a bankrupt railway system. Now, where is the logic in giving it to an Italian bankrupt company? Where is the money going to come from in order to invest in modernizing it, in making it safe? And essentially, I was playing one potential buyer against the other to gain time. But what was fantastically interesting was that these Troika people were simply uninterested in any discussion that involved technical issues, safety, investment, speed, efficiency. And while I was talking about investment, about, modernization and so on, they looked, their face beamed boredom. They were just bored. They didn't want to talk about technical issues, safety issues, economic issues, let alone social issues. But, they were supposed to be technocrats who didn't want to talk about technocratic stuff. And at some point, they explained to me why they were bored. They said, Янис, look, we've already agreed amongst ourselves. Your airports will go to Fraport. Your port of Piraeus will go to Costco. And your trains will go to the Italians. And then we've decided, why are you wasting our time? That was their attitude. And, by the way, a little aside, have you noticed that all three companies are state-owned? So Fraport, which took our airports in the end, is a nationalized German state-owned company. Costco, that took over the port of Piraeus, is not essentially, even legally, a state-owned Chinese company. And FS is a fully owned, 100% owned company by the Ministry of Finance of Italy, which of course doesn't have 3 pennies to rub together in order to invest in Greece's railways, right? It's a joke that the bankrupt Italian state is investing in the Greek railways, right? So it was nationalization. It wasn't even privatization. It was nationalization by the wrong states. So the Chinese state took the port, the German state took the airports, and the Italian state took our railways and put no money in it at all. Even in the airports, I mean, if you go now to Greek airports, if you fly into, Santorini, Mykonos, Chania, Thessaloniki, you'll see that the airports are very nicely refurbished. Don't get fooled. This is not money that the German company Fraport put into it. They didn't put in €1. Do you know where the money came from? From Greece's structural funds, from the European Union. Now, this is not just crony capitalism, it's mafia capitalism. It's not even capitalism, it's just mafia feudalism. Not even techno-feudalism, mafia feudalism. That's what it is. So the Italians got the trains. Now, of course, they didn't take the tracks. The tracks remained the property of the Greek state. This breakdown, this fragmentation, one broken down bankrupt company, state company, maintains the tracks with half, or actually 40% of the personnel they used to have. And the rolling stock is given to a bankrupt company, FS from Italy. Now, proof that they are bankrupt and that they have absolutely no sense of responsibility is that FS, after all they've had the Greek Railways now for 7 years. They brought some new trains onto Greece, except they are not new. They are 35-year-old trains that are banned in Central Europe as unsafe. So, you have this marriage of a bankrupt Greek state company owning the tracks and a bankrupt Italian company owning the ancient imported locomotives. Is going to lead to a bloody disaster. And it is a disaster which, unfortunately, has the imprint, the paw marks of all three major parties, New Democracy and PASOK, who started this ball rolling, And of course, Syriza, my former comrades, who after my departure, after my resignation, said yes to everything that the Troika was telling them to do. And in 2017, it was they who privatized the Greek railways. So this is a crime of omission and a crime of commission perpetuated by the political personnel here in Greece that said yes to the lenders, to the creditors, to the Troika, and of course by the Troika. You see, this is what happens when a country like Greece, Sri Lanka, Argentina, whoever, goes bankrupt. The vultures fly over the land and pick the flesh from the rotting corpse of the country. They took the airports, they took this, they took that, they put nothing in, right? And now we have the corpses of 57 of our own, men and women, mostly young people, who are being buried as we speak, with a government that knows no compunction whatsoever, does everything with impunity. Think about it. The Prime Minister, on the first day, went up to near the scene of the crash and said that he will leave no stone unturned until a proper commission of inquiry finds out what happened. And in the same sentence, gives us his verdict. It was human error. I wanted to say to him, Mr. Mitsotakis, you are a human error, your parents and your social classes, and we have to suffer you. I didn't, because politeness prevented me from doing that. I'm sharing this with you. And then 2 days later, they decided to sideline any parliamentary committee whose job, according to the Constitution, should be to investigate the accident, and to appoint a three-man, it's International Women's Day, let's make that pun or point as well. 3 men were appointed, 3 experts. One of them was a gentleman whose previous job, if you look at his CV, includes 7 years of overseeing the breakup of our railways and their privatization. So it's like asking a mafia boss to investigate a mafia crime. There's no other way of deciding it, of expressing it. And now for some good news, because we need to pierce this darkness with a few rays of hope. Young people out there have been energized by this. They are outraged. I have never seen, since 2015, such fervor, such rational and creative anger, such logical rage amongst the young. The police are attacking them. Eric has been attacked himself as part of our Mera block. You've seen the photographs. This is going to escalate. And it's escalating at a time when we're moving towards elections. There were rumors that we would be having the elections next month. Now that election is going to be pushed into the summer. This is very bad for us, because it means that the government has succeeded in disenfranchising the young. Because when young people take jobs in the summer to work in the tourist industry, from Athens they go to Crete, or from Thessaloniki they go to Rhodes to work in a godforsaken job, 7 days a week, no time off, for a pittance of money. It's very hard for them to return to their place of residence in order to cast a vote. We don't have postal votes in Greece. So essentially, we are going to lose something like 500 to 600,000 young people who will be disenfranchised by pushing the elections into the summer. This suits Mitsotakis and the regime down to the ground. They're very happy with that. I always suspected they would push the elections into May, June, July. Now they have an excuse for doing it. So, sorry for going on and on and on, but I could be talking, as you can imagine, for 5 hours about this. Their death must not be in vain. We must never forget that there is a criminal here. It is the international oligarchy and their policy of fragmenting public networks and privatizing them. Thank you.